Outrage erupts across the United States and Latin America as the Trump administration ends temporary protected status for more than 250,000 Venezuelan immigrants. Advocates are calling it one of the largest rollbacks of humanitarian protection in modern U.S. history. Well, I'm Whitney McCoy, and let's get into this contract. Like a Cinderella story, at midnight the clock ran out for hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans who had been living and working and raising families under the protection of Temporary Protected Status, or TPS, in the U.S. That program was designed to shield people from deportation when their home countries were deemed unsafe, whether due to war, natural disaster, or political instability. But now the Trump administration had terminated those protections, leaving nearly 250,000 Venezuelans vulnerable to detention, deportation, or forced return to a nation still gripped by dictatorship and economic collapse.
Hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans just lost their temporary protection status. Keyword temporary.
In a matter of hours, more than 250,000 Venezuelans will lose protection from being deported. Their temporary protected status, otherwise known as TPS, is set to expire on Friday before midnight.
On October 3rd, the Supreme Court sided with the federal government and ruled that 350,000 Venezuelans should lose their deportation protection. The decision will now affect another 260,000 whose TPS expires November 7.
Out of those Venezuelans, over 220,000 of them reside in Florida. That's a large percentage of what's going, of them being deported. So you're going to see a lot of ICE activity going on in Florida, which the government, they don't want that. They encourage you all to use the CBP program, the app, which assists with safe travels, not only safe travels, but free travels back to your country. And they have a lot of incentives. They even offer $1,000. I can only imagine how much money 1,000 USD converts into Venezuelan money. You're basically going back there with a lot of money that could sustain you for months, right? And if you don't like the government, there's more than enough people to make a change and impact. That's over 500,000 Venezuelans returning home because, a couple of months ago, 200,000 plus lost their TPS status, and they're not extending their status. So why not take advantage of the CBP app, which assists with travels, which even assists with money and other incentives. And there's a possibility that you could reapply to come back into the U.S. Why not?
Of course, the backlash was immediate. Immigrant rights advocates, legal experts, and humanitarian groups have condemned the decision as a devastating, discriminatory, and a deeply un-American. Hadi Gassama, senior policy counselor at the ACLU, said this moment represents far more than just the loss of status. For one group, I quote, it's an inflection point in a broader effort to dismantle humanitarian protections and put hundreds of thousands of our neighbors at risk. She's calling on Congress to show what she calls real courage by passing legislation that protects TPS holders and creates a path to citizenship. The human impact cannot be overstated. According to Adelys Ferro, head of the Venezuelan American Caucus, at least 260 Venezuelans will lose TPS, joining another 340,000 already stripped of their protection. That's over 600,000 people. Families who have paid taxes, contributed to local economies, and built new lives in the United States.
The Trump administration just announced it's capping the number of refugees the U.S. will take in the next year at 7,500. For comparison, under the Biden administration, that number was 125,000. So yeah, we didn't just lower the bar, we buried it somewhere in the basement. And here's where it gets controversial. Most of those limited refugee spots will reportedly be reserved for white South Africans. And just to put things into perspective, white South Africans make up about 7% of the population, but own more than 70% of farmland. Meanwhile, black South Africans, who are over 80% of the population, own about 4%. So yeah, the numbers don't exactly back up the anti-white discrimination narrative. This isn't the first time that Trump has slashed refugee numbers either. Back in 2019, he dropped the cap to 18,000. Then in 2020, he went even lower, 15,000. And now we're at 7,500.
Ferro says this isn't about law or policy. It's about xenophobia, racism, and discrimination. For many, she says returning to Venezuela under the current Maduro regime is simply not an option. This move follows I guess we could say rather disturbing pattern. Since taking office, the Trump administration has ended TPS protections, not just for Venezuelans, but also for Afghanistan, Cameroon, Haiti, Honduras, Nepal, Nicaragua, Syria, and several others. In total, more than 165,000 people now face possible separation from their families and deportation to nations in crisis. Human rights leaders argue this is a deliberate campaign targeting Black, Brown, and Middle Eastern immigrant communities, dismantling protections that Congress originally created, they said, to save lives. In a joint statement, Dos Guzman of Alianza Americas reminded Americans that Venezuelan migrants are now woven into the fabric of U.S. society. They are our neighbors, co-workers, caregivers. They are their friends. We cannot look away from the terror and separation that families are enduring, she said. Nor can we become numb to the cruel ending of programs meant to protect human life and dignity. Organizations like Communities United for Status and Protection and CASA say they'll continue fighting to ensure TPS holders are not erased, and that the United States lives up to the humanitarian values it stands for. It once stood for. So as hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans face an uncertain future, advocates are demanding that Congress acts, not with rhetoric, but with legislation. For them, it isn't just about politics. It's about families, it's about human life, and it's about whether America keeps its promise to protect the persecuted. For the African Diaspora News Channel, I'm Brittany McCoy, bringing you the stories that shape our world. Until next time, stay informed, stay connected.